Welcome to the citizens of Baltimore. This is June the 9th, 2021 meeting of the Board of Estimates. It is now called to order. In the interest of promoting health and safety as we continue to deal with COVID-19 pandemic, the Board of Estimates, as you can see, continues to meet virtually. At this time, I'll ask our Comptroller, Bill Henry, for any corrections, additions, or noted abstentions to today's agenda.
Mr. President, I'm sorry. My staff is telling me that we are not actually being seen on. Are we good now? Okay.
Yes, we are.
Okay, gotcha. All right. Thank you. Sorry for the confusion. Mr. President, we have no changes or corrections to today's agenda, and no protests were received for today's meeting. The following item is being deferred. On page 84, item number 1, Bureau of Procurement B500006139, Armed Security Guards. It's being deferred until June 23rd. The following items are moved to the non-routine agenda. On page 24, Department of Law Settlement Agreement and Release. On page 43, item number 1, Department of Audits. Audit Report, Enoch Pratt Free Library, a component of the City of Baltimore, Maryland Comprehensive Annual Financial Report for the fiscal year ended June 3rd, 2020. And on pages 100 to 127, Department of Human Resources, Administrative Manual Policies for New Travel Policy. The following item is being moved to the routine agenda on pages 51 and 52. Department of Public Works, ratification of amendment number 4 to agreement. The following abstention was reported to the board. Deputy Director of Public Works, Matthew Garbark, is abstaining on page 56. Department of Human Resources, relocation reimbursement. There are no other abstentions from other members of the board. There are no votes and no rejection of recommended awards. Thank you, Mr. President.
No, thank you, Mr. Comptroller. I now direct the board's attention to a memorandum from our office dated June 7th, 2021, identifying matters to be considered as routine agenda items, together with any corrections and additions that have been noted by the Comptroller. I will entertain a motion to approve the items contained in the routine agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Since it's been moved and properly seconded, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. The routine agenda is adopted. The first item of business today on the non-routine agenda at the desk can be found on page 24, the Department of Law Settlement Agreement and Release. We have several folks here from the Department of Transportation and Department of Law to speak on this item. At this time, I'll recognize Kurt Heinrich from the Department of Law. He will tell us and explain to us this item and this matter. Mr. Heinrich, the floor is yours. I yield the floor to you.
Mr. Heinrich won't be talking today. Will be me, the Deputy Solicitor, Darnell Ingram.
I'm sorry, Mr. Deputy Solicitor, the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. This is a settlement agreement between with the Law Department requesting that the board approve execution of a settlement agreement and release of Linda O'Connor in the amount of $27,000. On the evening of March 11th, the plaintiff allegedly tripped and fell on the even sidewalk and fell. She suffered injuries in the amount of $5,600, and due to the factual issues and also the liability that it may be posed to the city, the Law Department is recommending that the board approves the settlement of $27,000.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Solicitor. At this point, are there any questions from the board? Or I think, Mr. Comptroller, I yield the floor to you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Deputy Solicitor, so if Ms. O'Connor's accident occurred in March of 2017, when did she first file a claim with the city for damages?
I believe she filed a claim in 2019.
Was there a reason why there was a 2-year lag between when she was injured and when she filed a claim against us?
I have no knowledge of why delayed. I do have one of the chief solicitors, Ms. Liz, on the call that she can probably answer that more in depth. I'm sorry, you're on mute.
Good morning. I apologize for that. Good morning, Mr. Comptroller. The claim statement made by Ms. O'Connor was actually executed in April of 2017.
Oh, okay. All right. So if that's the case, why has it taken 4 years to get the settlement in place?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what took so long for Ms. O'Connor to file her litigation, but typically what happens is the plaintiff files a claim with the Law Department Central Bureau of Investigation, and then the claim is evaluated. And if the case doesn't resolve at that stage, then the plaintiff has the option to file a lawsuit, which is what happened in this case. The plaintiff has 3 years from the date of the accident to file the lawsuit in circuit court. Plaintiff filed the lawsuit. I'd have to check the exact date for you, and I could find it, but plaintiff believed timely filed her lawsuit, and then the litigation played out to the point that a trial was scheduled in this June, and prior to the trial, the case settled.
Okay, so maybe we should start over, and maybe if you could tell the board a little bit about the incident itself. Why is somebody tripping on a sidewalk? Why has that turned into a $27,000 settlement?
Because Miss O'Connor fractured her kneecap. So although she didn't have high medical bills, she did have a very bad injury, and the case was set for a jury trial. And it's uncertain what the jury would have found and how much the jury would have awarded to Miss O'Connor, and it could have been way north of $27,000. So I believe that's why the Law Department Settlement Committee approved the $27,000 settlement, and I could defer to the deputy solicitor and the solicitor on that.
No, I guess what I'm getting at is over the years, I have been told on multiple occasions that sidewalk repair is technically the responsibility of the property owner, and that the city will do it if the property owner doesn't, but because the city has the right of way for the public sidewalk, but that any liability issues involved in a broken sidewalk, I had been previously told, were the responsibility of the property owner. So I guess what I'm asking is, why is the city settling a case for a tripping hazard on a sidewalk?
Because I think you are correct that the city does require that the property owner either fix a sidewalk in front of their property, or if not, the city might do it and bill the property owner. I would have to defer to the Department of Transportation on that, but there is well-established case law in Maryland that the city has a general duty to maintain its streets and sidewalks and keep them in a reasonably safe condition. Case law says the city's not an insurer, but if there's a defect on the sidewalk that the city either knew of or should have known of, then the city could have become liable. And in this case, based on the nature of the defect, it is likely that a jury could have found the city liable for this defect on its sidewalks.
Okay, so then, and this part harkens back to what I'm going to call a similar case back in February, where a settlement came before the board for a cyclist who had been bicycling along and rode through what they thought was a puddle, but turned out to be an open manhole filled with water. And as a result, they had a serious accident and injuries, and the city ended up settling in the same sort of fashion. And what I'm trying to get a handle on here is, in that case, part of the issue was that manhole had been open for, as far as we could tell, several months. At any point during the settlement process or the claims process, does the law department reach out to the agency responsible for the situation to see if the situation has been corrected? Because my understanding is that by the time she filed the claim in February of 2019, the tripping hazard is still there. It was still there and may still be there now.
That's a great question, Comptroller. I can't speak to the past. I can't speak to the current environment as well as moving forward. That's one of the initiatives the law department is undertaking to work with risk and the the city administrator to figure out how to mitigate these risks moving forward. And so those conversations have started, and we hope to remedy these type of issues moving forward.
So maybe this is a question for transportation. Is that tripping hazard still there? Has this been resolved?
It is. This is Frank Murphy. Yeah, it is still there. We haven't had a ADA ramp contract for a couple of years. There's one that just came out this summer, and it's going to take care of this problem.
So
Frank, no, that's not totally true about not having any ADA contract. The current ADA contract will be covering this thing. So we've had other contracts.
So I guess one of the questions that then entails is, how long have we been dealing with the actual property owner? I mean, why haven't they made this repair and not us?
So we've attempted to, and the law department did attempt to get them to be held liable, but I believe the property was sold at a particular time, and then at the end of the day, it ends up being the city's issue. So even though they do have that responsibility, we end up holding the responsibility at the end of the day. Okay. So we can try to, but if we can't get them, or if there's some other piece, then we need to. Then it falls on us.
Is it going to be an expensive proposition to fix this tripping hazard?
No, it's going to take some design, but we're expecting 3 to 4 months.
Well, I get no. The reason I'm asking, is it expensive, is why hasn't this already happened? I mean, if the woman tripped back in March of 2017, filed a claim with the city pretty much immediately, a claim statement, I think the law department said, and then filed litigation in 2019, that's, depending on how you want to count it, 2 to 4 years that the city has been aware of this problem. And any given evening, another person could have tripped and fallen, hurt themselves badly, and subjected the city to tens of thousands of dollars of additional settlement costs. Is fixing the tripping hazard going to cost more than $27,000?
No.
Then why hasn't it been done yet?
Well, I've learned about this yesterday or 2 days ago, and I am taking care of it. So, okay. I mean, I guess we could have a better partnership with law to look at each individual case moving forwards, but I'm handling what I can.
Thank you, because that also harkens back to what I said in February, which is I asked whether the settlement committee, as part of its operating procedures, makes a point of connecting with the agencies and ensures that whatever we're being sued over is getting addressed sometime before. I mean, I'm not gonna go into why it takes so long to go through the settlement process. I understand that when you involve lawyers on two sides of something, that increases the time needed to do it. But what I don't understand is why we don't have something in place to make sure that when one of our constituents is injured due to something under city control, why isn't it like job one to make sure that it gets fixed while we're going through the settlement process? Is that not something that should be clear in the settlement committee's efforts?
So, Mr. Comptroller, I believe the deputy solicitor said that going forward, that they would ensure that they're opening the particular department or agency. I think that process should probably happen before settlement. Basically every case that's brought, we should connect with the agency and ensure that whatever problem is being alleged is kind of corrected at that particular point. So I believe they've already answered that. I saw the hand of Mr. Mayor. I yield the floor to you at this time.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. And Mr. President, I was going to go down a similar path. Mr. Comptroller, I think Deputy Solicitor Ingram said it best. We can't speak to why things didn't happen in the past, but as he said, we're going to make sure that happens from now moving forward. That's all we can control, and that's what we will do to make sure that we're not consistently having this happen over and over again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for your advocacy, Mr. Comptroller. At this point, are there any additional questions or concerns from members of the board? Hearing and seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to proceed.
I move that the board approve this item as recommended by the law department.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. A motion to approve. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. This item is approved for the settlement. Next item on the agenda is Enoch Pratt Free Library. This can be found on page 43, Department of Audits, the audit report for the Enoch Pratt Free Library Comprehensive Annual Financial report for fiscal year ending in June 30th, 2020. Auditor Pash, at this time, I will turn it over to you to walk us through the report. Mr. Auditor, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. President, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Comptroller, and the members of the Board of Estimates. My name is Josh Pash, and I am the City Auditor. I am here today to present the Enoch Pratt Free Library's Comprehensive Annual Financial Report for the year ended June 30th, 2020. I want to thank the library staff and our team for their work on this audit. The objective of this audit is to express an opinion on these financial statements based on our audit. The scope of our audit is the year ended June 30th, 2020. The CAFR was prepared by the library's business office, which is responsible for both the accuracy of the presented data and the completeness and fairness of the presentation, including all disclosures. In our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects the respective financial position of the governmental activities, each major fund, and the aggregate remaining fund information for the library as of June 30th, 2020. In planning and performing our audit of the financial statements, we consider the library's internal controls over financial reporting to determine the audit procedures that are appropriate in the circumstances for the purposes of expressing our opinions, but not for the purpose of expressing an opinion on the effectiveness of the library's internal control. Accordingly, we do not express an opinion on the effectiveness of the library's internal control, and during our procedures, we did not identify any deficiencies in internal control over the financial reporting that we would consider to be material weaknesses. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Auditor. At this time, are there any questions or concerns for Mr. Auditor as it relates to this audit of the Enoch Pratt Free Library? Hearing and seeing none, again, Mr. Auditor, thank you for all your work. There's no further questions or actions at this time. The audit report will be noted. The final item on the non-routine agenda today can be found on pages 100 through 127. It's the Department of Human Resources AM policies for new travel. This item first appeared on the BOE agenda a couple weeks ago, and both Comptroller Henry and myself had some initial concerns and questions with the administration. Prior to it being introduced, we were not briefed. We knew no information about it, nor were we included on, or our staff included on, the committee that ultimately helped make the recommendations. Based off that, that's why we needed to take some additional time to further understand I would like to thank the city solicitor for working directly hand in hand with my office, as well as the director of the Department of Human Resources for going over in detail the process in which it was completed, as well as answering some of the questions and concerns that some of my staff posed to them. So I appreciate your time and your staff time in doing so. At this point, I would ask the city solicitor, deputy solicitor, or even Mr. Director Herbert to speak on behalf of this particular item.
Good morning.
Thank you. Director Herbert will do so on behalf of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Herbert.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. President, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Comptroller, and distinguished members of the board. I met with an ad hoc committee comprised of DHR, finance, law, and the administration. The travel policies, as you all know, are in the 200 series of the administrative manual. Both HR and finance have joint responsibility for a number of the AMs and the AM policies in the 200 series of the administrative manual. And so we got together because we wanted to remove any ambiguity that existed with respect to reporting requirements for elected officials, but not only for elected officials, but to make clear that there would be a reporting requirement for employees who travel for business at the dime of a third party. And so the committee met to resolve those ambiguities in the existing policy. And the result of that is what is before the board today. Centrally, the major thrust of the changes is to add AM 239-1-2, which provides the process for reporting for travel of elected officials that is paid for by a third party, provides the threshold for that reporting and the process for that reporting to the Board of Estimates. It also adds language in AM 240-1 around what the requirement is for employees, that employees who are traveling for business purposes and that when that travel is paid for by a third party, those same reporting thresholds apply to city employees. This is to provide a level of transparency and accountability for all of those who are traveling and conducting city business when that business is paid for by third parties. I will say, to your point, Mr. President, in the past, we have a policy advisory committee that resides in DHR. That committee is comprised of HR professionals from across the city, as well as those from our policy and compliance office in the Department of Human Resources. In the past, members, employees from the Comptroller's office and the Council President's office also were invited to participate in that committee. With the transition, that did not take place. I accept responsibility for that and have advised my team that going forward, that members from the Comptroller's office and the Council President's office should be invited, as they have been in the past, to those policy advisory committees. And in many instances, because of that representation, those AM policy changes in the past did not require a formal briefing. And so that did not happen in this case. I accept responsibility for that. But again, I think that these changes are common sense changes that create the level of transparency and accountability that will again build the trust of our constituents in city government.
No, thank you so much, Director Herbert, for that explanation, as well as developing a corrective manner so we can ensure that we're all kind of on the same page prior to items being placed on the agenda. As the representative of 14 out of the 17 elected officials in the city that this will impact, obviously we wanted time to kind of go over it, talk to other council members, but again, just want to triple down on the quick responsiveness of the city solicitor's office, as well as yourself, in not only briefing us on the changes in the policy and what has been done in the past, but more importantly, going line by line through our questions and our concerns and answering all of them to satisfactory. I do believe, like you said, that the city elected officials, based off this policy, should be in line with our other city workers, right? And that's what this does. So the more transparent we are, the more straightforward we are around policies such as this, I think it's a better product, not only for the city, but more importantly for our residents and our constituents who need to trust the process now more than ever. So again, thank you for your hard work. Thank you to the solicitor for all of your time over the past 2 weeks with this as well. At this point, I'll entertain any additional questions or concerns from the board. Mr. Comptroller, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. While I would like to echo your comments in terms of thanking the city solicitor and Director Herbert, and also Chief Administrative Officer Shorter, all of whom I was able to have conversations with after the item was initially deferred. I do have to take issue with one part of Director Herbert's description of the policy change, which is describing the new policy of third-party funded travel as reporting it. If, in fact, this policy was just about reporting it, I would have no further concerns. I am, as everyone knows, a big believer in openness and transparency in government, and I believe it's important that employees be accountable to their bosses and elected officials be accountable to their constituents. This, however, is the Baltimore City Board of Estimates. We are the fiscal body for the city of Baltimore, responsible for the money of the city. If third-party funded travel was simply being reported to us, as for example, the audit of the Enoch Pratt Library was just reported to us, and we noted it, that would be one thing. But to ask the Board of Estimates, to require the Board of Estimates as a matter of administrative policy to approve third-party funded travel seems to be overreach. I honestly believe that if the funds that are paying for a trip, whether it be by an employee or an elected official, if the funds are not coming from the city, then I don't understand why, whether that trip happens or not, is being approved or disapproved at the Board of Estimates level. If it's an employee who has been offered a third-party funded trip and the mayor or the agency head doesn't want them to go, they can just tell the employee not to go. And if it's an elected official who has been offered a third-party funded trip, who are we to tell an elected official that they can't go somewhere on somebody else's dime?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Comptroller. And I would just preface my comment by saying that under its current iteration, AM 239-1-1 requires that, and that's the AM policy that deals with elected official travel. It has a clause in it that says all travel over $800 requires Board of Estimates approval. Now, there is some ambiguity there, which is why the committee was brought together. And I will say in the past, other elected officials have come to the board when the travel met that threshold, whether it was funded by third parties or not, and the Board of Estimates has voted to approve that travel. What this particular policy does is that this policy, again, it restores that transparency and accountability, and the board is on the record. When the board approves this travel, the board is on the record as verifying that the rules have been followed and that the travel merits approval. And that, again, it holds all of the elected officials accountable. And I think that that is something that the administration wanted very desperately, to have transparency and accountability, to make sure that the citizens have that level of trust, that even when third parties are paying for conferences or travel or trips,
for electeds performing business of the city, and that's the key. This is not saying that if a third party is funding business that is not city funding a trip that is not city business, that has to come to the Board of Estimates. The policy is clear that it applies to city business. And so this is approving travel that elected officials are going on that a third party is paying for to conduct business on behalf of the city. And so this, we believe that the requirement of Board of Estimates approval is consistent with what the practice has been in the past. And again, it provides that level of accountability and trust. And as you know, Mr. Comptroller, there are things that are noted on the Board of Estimates agenda quite frequently that are noted as routine, that the citizens would not understand or know what is going on. This requirement for approval opens the door and allows the citizens to know what's going on and to know when their elected officials are traveling on the dime of a third party. It gives them that ability to have that understanding. And I will defer to the solicitors. I think I saw his hand go up.
Before you defer to the solicitor, Mr. Herbert, whenever we note an audit, it is automatically on non-routine. And that can be a practice of this board to ensure that anything we note can be non-routine and be spotlighted. I am not against spotlighting this information. I am getting at the very basic concept of who an elected official is accountable to. Elected officials are accountable to their constituents. That's why there are elections. They are accountable to their constituents. And what I take issue with, sir, is that a working group of unelected officials came up with a policy in which they decided that they were going to treat elected officials as if they were all accountable to the mayor and Board of Estimates, as opposed to being accountable to their constituents. And that, sir, I think, is a problem.
Thank you, Mr. Comptroller. Director Herbert, would you like to respond? Or if not, we're going to go over to the city solicitor.
I would defer to the solicitor.
All right, city solicitor, I yield the floor to you.
You're on mute, sir.
You're on mute, city solicitor.
I was just thanking everybody. So let me repeat, thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Mr. Controller, for your questions. As to the point of no expenditure being made, and therefore the involvement of the Board of Estimates, logically it is suggested should have a lesser role. We all know that the Board of Estimate approves all grants to the city. They all come through the Board of Estimates, and for good reason, because they affect the fiscal well-being of the city. This is on a much smaller level, but in effect, these travel that's paid for by a third party is a grant. It's a grant for city business. So I think it is absolutely within the purview of the Board of Estimates to assess these grants to particular people for city business, just as it measures larger grants. As to the point of approval of the Board of Estimates, I think everyone's looking at this from a perspective that isn't complete. When the Board of Estimates approves travel, as opposed to disapproves it, that puts all of the elected officials on the Board of Estimates and the other non-elected officials on the Board of Estimates accountable for that travel. And that's a good thing, because if travel is improperly taken and approved by the Board of Estimates, all should pay, elected and non-elected members of the Board of Estimates alike. That's the accountability point. One thinks of accountability on the elected official himself or herself. It's true, there is accountability there, but this makes the Board of Estimates accountable for this third-party funded travel. And that's important because the citizens of Baltimore are entitled to know that everyone is looking out for their interest and not just a particular elected official. What happens all too often when something is noted or observed about a colleague elected official is there's deference among the elected officials, one to the other. Well, he wants to take that trip or she wants to take that trip. I'm not going to object to that and make a fuss. Well, this puts the Board of Estimates on the spot. They have to say yes or no. There's no sweeping under the rug under these new rules. And I think that's the kind of accountability we want to have.
Thank you, Mr. Solicitor. And I'll just echo that. The reality is it puts the 17 city elected officials in line with thousands of city employees to do the same exact thing. I think that was one key deliverable that I wanted to make sure that at the end of the day, we will be responsible for doing the same thing that be it a police officer to the police commissioner, DPW worker to the DPW director, just everybody under the city's umbrella is in line with the same exact policy. At this time, I see the hand of our mayor. I yield the floor to you, Mr. Mayor.
No, thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Mr. Comptroller. Thank you, Mr. Solicitor, and everyone. I think for me, I just want us to be reminded, when I put this group together, I asked them to close all ambiguity, close any loophole, and for us to have a open and transparent process for everyone. And that's what we have here, to make sure that we are protecting the best interests of the city in every way. Because while I don't think that would happen, there could be cases where elected officials are going to things or trying to go to places that maybe the city isn't doing business with, or going to a conference for a hate group. We have to make sure that we are considering everything the possibilities when we're making these decisions. And I think we have come to a place in a process that is transparent, that does put city elected officials in line with other employees and allows it to be seen for everyone to see. Thank you.
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor, for that. And again, I think the only misstep, and I know we're clearing those things up, and Director Herbert said, is that, we should have been part of that process, right? And I think we all agree to that. Again, I represent over 80% of the individuals that this will affect on this body. 15, including myself, out of the 17 elected officials that are considered city elected officials that this will ultimately affect. So the only thing is, just bringing us up to speed quicker. And I think the administration is completely on the record in saying that will happen going forward. At this point, are there any additional questions or concerns from the board? Comptroller Henry, I see your hand raised.
I see where the conversation is going, so I won't take too much longer. I will just say that, as the mayor said earlier, the past is the past. My concern is that these rules are for the future, and they are not necessarily just for those of us at this meeting today. And I will take advantage of my history to say that there have been mayors in the past who may have been willing to use the power given them as they saw fit. And at the end of the day, as much as we can sit here and talk about this Board of Estimates being a Board of Estimates with many city officials on it and many elected officials, at the end of the day, we know that as the Board of Estimates is currently composed, the mayor's decision is the one that counts at a Board of Estimates. And that means what we are approving today is continuing the practice of the past of letting the mayor effectively decide what other elected officials get to do or don't get to do. I appreciate the good intentions that have gone into this policy, but I feel it would be irresponsible of me not to point out that we are, with the best of intentions, setting forth on a path that will continue to allow for a future mayor to overreach on what should be accountability between an elected official and their constituent, not an elected official and their mayor. And with that, I thank you for your time.
No, thank you, Comptroller Henry. At this point, are there any additional questions or concerns from members of the board? Hearing and seeing none, I know that the president of the Baltimore chapter of the NAACP was directed to, I guess, my office this morning from yourself, Comptroller Henry. So at this time, we will provide the opportunity for Mr. Kobe Little to speak on behalf of this particular item.
Good morning, and thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Comptroller, and members of the Board of Estimates. I am Kobe Little, and I am here on behalf of the Baltimore NAACP. My comments regarding this policy are not directed at any individuals in any particular offices at the present time, but I do want to first say that I appreciate the hard work that everyone has put into the policy. Solicitor Shea, I appreciate your defense of the policy, and I also appreciate Comptroller Henry and his polite way of simply wanting to go on the record. But I want to urge this body to put a full halt to moving forward with this policy based on what you've heard from Comptroller Henry and based on the remarks that I will give now. The purpose of this policy is twofold. One, it is to provide transparency, which is an important thing. And two, it is to dictate approval for travel. Now, the solicitor has suggested that this is a way to increase accountability. That is a possible outcome, but the other possible outcomes have a negative impact on democracy and outweigh the positive possible outcomes. The comptroller has already spoken to what many of those negative potential outcomes are. But listen, before we even begin to talk about the policy, we need to address the fact that this body seeks to use an administrative rule to curb powers and authorities delineated in state law, in the city charter, and the code of this city. Frankly, that's anti-democratic. It is anti-democratic for a body that one person controls 3 votes on to decide to implement a policy that overrides what years of elected law, years of legislation that has been passed by people who have been elected by the citizens of this state and of this city have put in place. So I want to caution first about the overreach of the process. This process is overreaching. And you know, we would recommend, the NAACP would recommend that we come up with solutions that address problems, not come up with solutions that create more problems or come up with solutions where there are not problems. It's been said that this policy eliminates all ambiguity, but it's our perspective that this policy creates greater ambiguity. On the question of this policy only pertaining to city business, while it says that this is relevant for city business, it does not say that it is limited to city business and does not apply to business related to civic organizations or congregational life or to employment. And the fact of the matter is that a great deal of the elected officials in Baltimore City are actually part-time elected officials. And if my memory serves me correctly, they still have the right to have other employment or to be entrepreneurs. This policy creates a huge window of ambiguity around whether or not they have to come before this body for approval for travel for work. And if you think that this policy speaks clearly that it's only about city travel or travel for city business, then why would there be the clause in this policy that says that travel paid for by family members is accepted? What family member, what mother, husband, daughter or sibling is going to pay for an elected official to travel according to something relevant to city business. So it doesn't make sense. And then the idea that the travel is outside of the lower 48 states. When I read that, what I see is, well, you got to get approval if you want to take the trip to Hawaii, because we can't really justify that a trip to Hawaii has good optics. But that clause betrays the intent of this policy, because there's no way that you can get to Hawaii for less than $100 or less than $800. So there's no reason to put that in there, except for that this policy is officious and it is gratuitous. And that's not directed at anybody who has developed the policy, but it is to say that we must be ever so cautious not to create so many policies that we confuse the issues, that we complicate the issues, and that we make it more likely that someone will be tripped up and held accountable for something that they shouldn't be held accountable for. The city solicitor spoke to the idea of this creating more accountability because more elected officials will be involved in the process. But what it can also do is stifle the work of elected officials, because no elected officials want to approve somebody going to Hawaii for a trip. But that trip in Hawaii could be very valuable. And at the end of the day, as the comptroller has already said several times, elected officials are accountable to the voters. And I would say to you, the NAACP would say to you, do not subvert and usurp the democratic process and the will of the voters by passing a policy that reduces elected officials' ability to make decisions about how they use their time, about which conversations are important to them. It is very, very possible that a mayor could decide for political reasons that he does not want a comptroller, a council member, or a council president, or any other elected official covered under this policy to travel to a meeting, because they may be able to get information at that meeting that would oppose the mayor's policies. That is a huge risk, and it threatens to dampen the democratic process. Now, there is so much to unpack in this policy, so much that is faulty, and I mean that with no disrespect, that I don't have enough time to talk about it today. So I would urge this body to table this matter and to have more conversation about the policy, starting with identifying what the extant problems are that the policy seeks to solve, and then making sure that we check for usurpation of the democratic process, make sure that we are not complicating the process, make sure that we are not subjecting elected officials and or employees to needless peril because of excessive reporting and approval requirements. As a closing note, and this is why this policy is not about current elected officials, I would like to point out that both the current comptroller and the current mayor were a part of a city council that worked with the voters of this city to lessen the centralization of power in the office of mayor through a reduction in the number of votes needed to override a veto, as well as in the capacity of the city council to remove any elected official for malfeasance. Those policies changed the way our democracy operates in this city, and the electorate has the authority to do that, Mr. Solicitor. But it was done through a democratic process, through voting on the charter and then through the passage of legislation, not through an administrative rule in a body that has 5 members, but 1 member controls. So I would seriously caution this body about reversing the trend and the will of the electorate to reduce the power of the mayor, not this particular mayor, but any mayor, from dictating what happens in this city. I'm available to respond to any questions Again, the Baltimore NAACP urges the Board of Estimates to table this matter and not to vote on this matter today. Thank you.
No, thank you, President Little. At this time, are there any additional questions, concerns from members of this board? Hearing and seeing none, I'll entertain, Mr. Comptroller, I see your hand raised.
First of all, I want to thank Reverend Little for his remarks and say publicly, if I'd known what he was going to say, I would have been quieter. Because I think he did a better job of saying it than I did. I am happy to move to table this matter indefinitely if there would be a second.
Well, we don't have to vote to defer, but you can defer it if you like, or we can move forward and go for a vote. I think the board is prepared to vote it out today, but if you have additional questions or concerns and you would like to defer it, definitely I'll provide the deference and we can defer it to the next meeting.
I yield to the mayor.
Mr. Mayor, the floor is yours.
I move that we approve.
There's a motion on the table.
Second.
Okay.
Well, I think before we go to that, Comptroller Henry had the floor. So before we entertain the secondary motion, what would you like to do, Comptroller Henry? You defer to the mayor, so it's back to you.
Okay, so here's the thing. I would be happy to ask for it to be deferred. I'm unclear as to whether the board. Okay, then you know what? I would ask for this matter to be deferred so that there can be more public involvement and engagement in the specifics of the policy before we vote on it.
Okay.
Mr. President?
Yeah.
I think by rule, there was a motion and a second on the floor. So I think that by rule.
No, so
we don't have any rules.
Yeah. Well, so Comptroller Henry put a motion out there to defer. He did. I told him to rescind that motion because there is no actual motion to defer, but he has the ability as a member of this board to ask for an item to be deferred. Hold on one second.
So this is one of the issues that the solicitor and I discussed.
So hold on, Comptroller Henry. So just to answer your question, Mr. Mayor, when you then subsequently, because he yielded the floor to you at that time, when you had the subsequent motion, his initial action superseded that, and that's the action that we're taking up now. If he pulls that away and he's okay, then we'll go to the motion and the properly second motion that you executed. So at this point, Comptroller Henry, again, the floor is yours.
I'm happy to ask for this to be deferred, but only if the administration is willing to actually engage in conversation about taking up the issues that Reverend Little raised. If there's no appetite for that, then I don't want to waste everybody's time.
Then we should just move the motion.
Comptroller Henry, again, I think you are in the driver's seat at this point. So
I stated my intent, sir. If the administration was willing to engage in additional conversation with the intention of coming up with some type of new language that addressed Reverend Little and the NAACP's concerns, I would be happy to ask for a deferral, but it does not seem like the administration is interested in doing so. So I would have expected that would have been accepted. So
you're withdrawing the deferral, correct?
Technically, I never offered one.
Okay.
I offered a conditional deferral, and the conditions were not met.
All right. Conditional deferral. I got you. All right. So are you finished, Mr. Comptroller?
I believe we're done here.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Comptroller. I believe the floor is yours, Mr. Mayor. So I think you provide a superseding, a subsequent, I'm sorry, a motion. That motion, I believe, was properly seconded. So at this point, we're going to go into voting to approve this item. At this point, since it's been moved and properly seconded, all in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
We have 3 ayes, we have 3 nays, and I'm going to abstain from this particular vote. So it passes, and then we're moving on. So as there is no additional business before this board at the desk, we will recess until bid opening at 12 noon. The Board of Estimates will reconvene on Wednesday, June 16th at 9 a.m. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. Baltimore, please continue to stay safe. Please continue to follow all health protocols as we continue to battle with COVID-19 pandemic. Baltimore, we love you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. The Board of Estimates is now in session for the receiving and opening of bids. As part of the overall effort to limit transmission of the COVID-19 virus, the Board of Estimates is conducting bid openings virtually. Members of the public can call in to listen to bid openings live by calling 443-984-1696 and entering access code 0842939. Board of Estimates meetings are broadcast live on Charm TV, Channel 25, on Comcast Cable in Baltimore City. Meetings are also streamed on the internet at https://www.charmtvbaltimore.com/live-stream. The Board of Estimates will continue to conduct bid openings virtually while the state of emergency declared by the Mayor of Baltimore and the Governor of Maryland remains in effect. I have the following addendum to note. Bureau of Procurement B500006037, Charter Bus Services. Please change the bid due date from June 9th, 2021 to June 23rd, 2021. Thank you.
I move that we note the addendum.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The first and only bid to be open today is procurement proposal for B500006234 Energy Consulting Services. There is no bid bond. This bid is from New Energen LLC in the amount of well, there's 2 different quantities here and they're not totaled, so I'll read them individually. For commodity code 91841, the bid is $825,252.48. And for commodity code 91841, same commodity code, just a different line number, the amount is $249,747.47.
I'm sorry, Mr. Controller, you lost me.
Sorry.
It's not you, it's me. Can you try it again?
The bid amount is $249,747.47.
Good.
That match what you're seeing?
Yep.
Okay.
The first item, I believe, is electricity, and the second one is natural gas.
Ah, there we go. Thank you. Man. Let's see this. The second bid is from Amorex Brokers LLC. And for the first item, which is all BRCPC electricity accounts. Their quote is 30 cents per megawatt hour. And for the second commodity code for BRCPC natural gas accounts, their quote is 6 cents per million cubic feet. So that's what it says, and we will let procurement sort that out.
I move that we refer these to procurement for tabulation and report.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. And we look forward to seeing how procurement chooses to deal with one bid of 17 apples and another bid of 34 oranges. With that, the business before the board is concluded. The board stands in recess until 9 a.m. next Wednesday morning, June 16th. And thank you very much, and stay safe.